lot of NFL news, top 15 remaining free agents. Where could they go? We talked a lot about Tannehill earlier in the week on the show, and he got traded today. Ryan Tannehill traded to the Titans. Also, the news on Kareem Hunt, his suspension. We'll get into that. Baker Mayfield speaks. And some other NFL. There's some by the way, the pictures of Foles in Jacksonville are just pretty odd. You know, it's just a weird, Jacksonville's got this tiny stadium down there. The Eagles have a much bigger stadium than Jacksonville does. And they have a picture of Foles down on the field with his wife, and I see like this it looks like they're playing in like the MAC compared to Lincoln Financial Field. It's supposed to be like this big, impressive scoreboard behind them, John. And there's Nick Foles with I just feel like he just went from like one of the biggest draws in the NFL to like Nowheresville. He's in like Whoville.
Well, it depends how you look at it. I mean, the contract he got. Now he's a starting quarterback in this league. He's paid like one. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, I mean, they got an owner who's worth over $6 billion. He's, there's been some speculation that they would be the team to ultimately move to London because he owns a soccer team over there as well, Shad Khan.
He's also buying a wrestling company, right?
Yeah, he's also starting the new wrestling company. Well, his son, he kicked that off to his son, so he gave that to him for a project. But the Jaguars are financially well heeled, as some teams are not. The Oakland Raiders, an example, basically need to get to Las Vegas because their owner, it's funny to say, but you've heard it with some of the rumors with them being involved with Le'Veon Bell. When you sign a player to a contract, and we see all these numbers, but the key numbers, the guarantees, you have to put that money in escrow. It's not like you can say, well, we promise. And it's funny to say an NFL team lives hand to mouth like some of the fans, and the Raiders kind of do that on a different level. But when Mark Davis is worth about $500 million versus the typical billionaire like Shad Khan who's worth over $6 billion, you can see the difference. So the Jaguars are not some rinky-dink organization. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. John, you look at some of the things that have happened. We talk about quarterbacks. We talked a lot about Tannehill the other day. He got traded to the Titans here, and that could be the first possible shot fired that Mariota could be on his last year in Tennessee.
Well, I think you can never have enough mobile, injury-prone quarterbacks. I think that's the way Tennessee's looking at it. But they renegotiated a deal. It's a one-year deal that is very cost-effective for Tannehill, and it'll pay him a little bit more if he does have to start. So I don't think he's coming in there to compete or anything of that nature. But ultimately, look, I don't think either of those guys are the answer. Next year at this time, we'll probably be talking about the Tennessee Titans as a team looking for a quarterback. And the Miami Dolphins, woof. I mean, right now, Jake Ruddick and Luke Falk are the quarterbacks on the Miami Dolphins roster. And, I kind of joke that AAF teams are deeper at the quarterback position than the Miami Dolphins right now. Obviously, they're going to make some moves. They tried to bring Teddy Bridgewater back home as a bridge starter. I think wisely he decided to stay in New Orleans because he's got a better opportunity long-term there as the potential heir apparent to Drew Brees. They still have the draft, but it's ugly in Miami right now.
Yeah, John, and, if you're a quarterback on the free agent market, you're certainly, if you want a job maybe, but that doesn't seem like the most attractive place to go at this point. So that's why, Bridgewater probably decided, I'll sit on the bench and get paid again for the opportunity to be the quarterback in New Orleans, a year or two. Does that signal to you that maybe we could be seeing the end soon, for Drew Brees sooner than later?
Well, not if he keeps playing the way he's playing last season. I mean, that team was on the cusp of the Super Bowl. We all know the play and the penalty. And a lot of people thought the rightful team in the Super Bowl should have been the Saints. I mean, he was tremendous. He was really the runner-up in the MVP conversation. And the way the game is being played, and Tom Brady obviously is the other perfect example, you can play into your 40s now at that particular position at a very high level. And I've seen absolutely no slip in Drew Brees' game. So, I mean, to say he's going to be gone next year or the year after, you got to see the descent start before you start talking about that. But I do think from Bridgewater's standpoint, I mean, Miami's going to be so bad, you're going to be one and done. So you might be able to put NFL starter on your resume. Tyrod Taylor did the same thing. He could have been the starter in Miami. Instead, he went back with Anthony Lynn to be the backup to Phillip Rivers, another aging quarterback. I think that was a smart decision as well. The Dolphins almost have to go draft for the quarterback because veteran guys are making smarter decisions for their future.
Yep, and, there's a lot of interesting stories with the quarterbacks out there. Flacco traded this offseason, as we saw. Now you've got Foles obviously on the move. Tannehill, so three guys who started last year. What about Blake Bortles? Where do you think are some spots for him? Do you think that he might say, you know what, I've been bad, people don't like me, I want to play, I'll go to Miami?
Yeah, he might. I mean, everybody's in that conversation. They need a starting quarterback. I mean, Jake Ruddick is not going to be their starting quarterback. So they're going to have to get a veteran. If I'm Blake Bortles, I would do what Teddy Bridgewater and Tyrod Taylor did and try to find a spot where I could be a backup, a well-paid backup, and maybe try to get another chance this way because in the short term, it's going to be ugly with the Dolphins. So you do know, again, it's sort of what you're weighing. Do you want starting NFL quarterback on your resume, or do you want to be smarter about it and realize, well, I'm just going to look really, really bad again, and maybe that limits my opportunities down the road. It's kind of just the way people look at it.
Yeah. A couple other things I want to get into here before we talk about some of the other NFL news, but I want to get into yesterday's news with Golden Tate. I don't hate the move because it fits Eli's skill set, right? I mean, he fits what Eli wants to do, just kind of, nickel and dime you down the field, right?
I don't know. We talked about this a couple days ago with the Giants. I mean,
John, this is the ultimate, though. They got rid of a guy perceived to be a headache for maybe the nicest human being in the world.
Yeah, that's true. So, maybe locker room culture plays into it. But I think they realize they're not a contender, and they're willing to take a step back, to take two steps forward. It's interesting. People have short memories, and they kind of did the same thing when Eli was young and got rid of Jeremy Shockey and Tiki Barber, who were the stars on that team. And they did it specifically because they didn't want their personalities overwhelming a young quarterback. And there were some big personalities. They do the same thing with OBJ. Now, they don't have a young quarterback in place now, but understand they're going to get one, whether it's in the draft this year or next year, whether it's Josh Rosen or somebody of that nature. Ultimately, they're going to get a young quarterback. And I just think it's interesting Giants fans forget so quickly that this is not the craziest thing in the world. And then the second part is look at that team's record with Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, it's not like they're winning, and it's not his fault. I'm not trying to portray that on him because this is the ultimate team sport. It really is. You can't just sign a really, really talented wide receiver and say you're going to win a bunch of football games. That's not how it works.
Yeah. But,
so
I mean, the Tate signing, I see the Tate, like, it works for I don't mind it if you're like looking at it like, hey, this fits Eli's skill set, but they gave him a lot of money, a lot of guaranteed money. In the long run, I don't know how much it makes sense, but for like 2019, if you just want to have
for Golden Tate, I mean, I think they plan on him being the slot receiver for at least the next few years, and that's Eli and post Eli. So I think it has more to do with just taking advantage of whatever Eli Manning has left, which is not much. I think he's part of the realization, and Dave Gettleman has kind of said this is a league, and this is where it differs from the NBA. You can try to win football games and still build at the same time and still end up with a successful product. That's what the Giants are trying to do.
Yeah, and, here's the question. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. Would you rather have had – now, I know your answer, but Tate got essentially the same money as Aguilar.
Yeah, no.
Well, not the guarantee. The guarantee is different.
I think Golden Tate is a better player. My first choice would have been Nelson with an extension and get his cap number down a little bit because he's younger. And I think, what the Eagles are looking for, he's got more athleticism. He's a little bit more dynamic. He can do some things that Golden cannot do as far as jet sweeps and reverses, and Doug likes to put them in the playbook. So it's not necessarily that I'd rather have Golden Tate. In fact, I'd rather have Nelson Aguilar for this particular offense, but I don't want him at that number. I don't think your fourth option, that's when you're talking about building rosters and allocating assets, they've allocated more money to the wide receiver position than any other team in the NFL as we stand here today. And that's, if you consider where they've been at that position, that's kind of crazy.
Yep, good stuff with John McMullen. Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline at JF McMullen on Twitter. Kareem Hunt suspended 8 games by the league. So the Browns are going to be without him for 8 games. So my question is, there's a lot of talk about Duke Johnson being on the trade block. Do you think that precludes them now from putting him on the trade block? Because that's a guy that I'm sure Howie Roseman might have had an eye on.
No, I don't think it precludes them. In fact, I think it makes it more clear, more definitive for them. Now they know the time frame. They know they have to get to game number 9, and they're going to have Kareem Hunt back unless something else happens. But you can't sort of run your organization. So now they can make an informed decision. Do they want to keep him around knowing that he's probably not going to be involved in the second half of the season unless injuries take hold? And I think the logic there is you probably would put him on the trade block if you can get something of value, because you'll be able to cobble through with Nick Chubb and somebody else as a backup until Kareem Hunt gets back. So I think it's, if anything, it gives them sort of closure in the fact they realize what they have to get through. And that makes it more likely they might put him on the trade block.
Yeah, and do you think that's a guy that Howie would have interest in?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I hear both sides of this argument, and a lot of people say Howie doesn't value the running back position, and I see why people take that path because they have been running back by committee for so long. But I don't think it's necessarily that he doesn't value it as much as he hasn't been able to get the right player, so he's not going to overspend for a 2-down running back. And I always point back to the 2017 draft and Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. I mean, it's not – he wants a dynamic talent at the running back position, hasn't been able to find it, and he's not going to overpay for just some guy. So I think there's both sides of the fence. Duke Johnson is one of those guys where I think he would be an improvement in a committee approach, but I don't think he's that guy. So when Howie gets to a point and says, we can't get the player we want, then you start talking about the players that just make you better.
Yeah, and I know. Let me ask you: do you think there will be a concerted effort on the trade market for that position for Philadelphia? I mean, do you think that is the way they have to go now, or are they just content keeping what they have and finding something in the draft?
Well, I don't think they have to go the trade route. I think they'll talk about it. We've mentioned Jordan Howard, his history with Joe Douglas. We've mentioned Duke Johnson. I think if somebody like Jerick McKinnon is released in San Francisco, I think he'd be of interest. I think there's a lot of ways they can still look at it, and the draft is one of them. I don't think ultimately Josh Jacobs will be there at 25 overall.
Would they trade up for him?
I don't think so. That's where it comes in is, do they value him as much as a McCaffrey or even a Cook? I don't know. We'll have to see how it shakes out. Certainly not McCaffrey, at least. And then you talk about second and third round guys, and a lot of people point to Devin Singletary, and he's got some traits that remind people of LaShawn McCoy. So maybe you go in that direction. They're going to add bodies at the position. I can say that. I think it might come from each. I think it might come from the veteran market, whether it's trade, free agency, somebody getting released, and a draft pick.
Yeah, I'm interested, because somebody texted in earlier, does Howie have a plan? What's he doing? He's only added Deshaun Jackson and Malik Jackson. And I'm like, calm down.
Does he have a plan?
Right. The second phase of free agency has really not even got underway here. Like, that first day, everybody has their eye. But this isn't where you pick up the guy. I mean, well, people, the casual fan wants the big splash.
They really do. And it's amazing if you look at, this fan base, all they wanted was a Super Bowl. They got a Super Bowl 52. The Lombardi Trophy is in.
Get me more. I need it again. I got to have that feeling again.
Yeah, I agree with that. I understand why people want another one, but they forget the values. I would argue, Patrick Robinson and Chris Long and LeGarrette Blount, they were all second-tier free agent signings. They were later in the process. They were bargains. I say it all the time. I've said through free agency, the smart money comes in when the stupid money is spent. And there is everybody saw that picture of Bill Belichick in Barbados.
Yeah.
While these bad teams are falling over themselves to give good players superstar money. It almost, look at the history of free agency and look at the history of guys who get through 2 years and then teams can cut them and they're right back on the market. I don't get it. I don't get it, Mike.
Isaiah Crowell, TJ Yeldon, any interest?
Yeah, they're in that veteran category. That would be upgrades, but it's not the guy. It's not, this team has been trying to get a 3-down back.
Well, at this stage of the game, it's pretty hard to do, don't you think?
Yeah, it's very hard to do. That's why they can't do it.
This is the proverbial kick the can down the road and just figure out what you're going to do with this year until you can get another crack at it next year. Although,
exactly. You can't have an all-pro at every position. So what do you do? And that's the point I bring up with Chris Long and Patrick Robinson, LeGarrette Blount, players like that. They're fill-ins. They're not superstars, but they fit great in this organization for a particular year and help the team. We're all very important in helping the team get to a Super Bowl championship. That's where they are at the running back position. They weren't able to get Le'Veon Bell. They weren't able to get Christian McCaffrey in the draft a couple years ago. So then you go in a different direction and you say, who's the best possibility to be in a committee for Doug Peterson? Who knows? Jay Ajayi might be back if he can't find another deal. There's a lot of names still out there.
Yeah. Jordan Matthews, by the way, signed with San Francisco. So does Mac Hollins have a shot this year?
Not to be relevant as a receiver. I think he's going to be a core special teams guy. But if you look at this, and you always say if injuries pile up, then he has an opportunity to show some things. But, I mean, this team is incredibly deep at receiver and tight end right now. And he's just not going to get much playing time unless guys get banged up. But he is a valuable special teams guy, still on his rookie contract. So I think he'll be part of this team. But I don't think he'll be relevant as far as being a receiver in the offense.
John, you wrote about Chris Long today, and I guess he hasn't decided what he wants to do in 2019?
No, he wants to wait until after the draft. And Chris has been very consistent with his mentality that he believes he can play, and there's no evidence he can't. He was very good again last season. But it's not about money for him. It's about the role. So he wants to wait till after the draft. And the key today with the restructure, he had a $2 million bonus on March 17th. So the Eagles had to make a decision. From their standpoint, they want him around. I believe they were going to give him that money. And it was almost sort of his side that said he doesn't want to get involved because if the Eagles say are at 25 overall, and they do draft an edge rusher because that's the best player there, well, they're going to want to get that guy reps. And if that's the situation, Chris is not going to have the role he wants, and he probably walks away, to be honest. But if it doesn't, and the Eagles go in a different direction, I think with the trade of Michael Bennett, bringing in Malik Jackson, who's an interior player, I think the role's there for him. I think the Eagles want him back. They plan to have him back. And he's just a guy who says, look, things can change. Teams, if there's somebody there in one of the deepest edge player drafts in the last 10 years and the Eagles have to take him, Chris doesn't want to go back and say after the draft, well, I'm not going to come back after essentially agreeing. So he just agreed to put that roster bonus back to May till after the draft, and then he'll make his decision.
John, you covered the NBA for a long time. I want to get your take on what kind of player you think Zion Williamson will be at the NBA level.
I haven't seen him, to be honest. I don't get enough time to see him play all that much. So I certainly wouldn't have a great feel for that. I know he has the athleticism to be a high-level NBA player. We've seen it with, I think, Ben Simmons, who to me is a tremendous player. But if you remember, Mike, when Ben Simmons came in, I said ultimately he would be more important than Joel Embiid. It hasn't worked out that way. And the reason why, he hasn't developed a jump shot. If he did, I think he'd be the best player in the NBA. It's a different game than it once was. It's more of a three-point shooting game. So if you're a wing player that athletic that can shoot, you're going to be a superstar. I don't know if he can shoot at that level. But I haven't seen him play.
Yeah, no, I think I thought out loud about that. I tweeted it, and people were coming after me like, have you not seen this great guy? I'm like, yeah, he's 6'5" who doesn't shoot the three in today's world. I'm kind of intrigued to see what kind of offensive player he might be at this level. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we've seen, I think it's interesting because Sixers, and this is long overdue, are making a big push to get Bobby Jones in the Hall of Fame. Now, anybody who's been around for a while, it's kind of amazing that he's not already there. But if you think about that era of basketball, and Bobby Jones, one of the great defensive players of all time, one of the great finishers, too. You can picture those old highlights of Mo Cheeks leading the break. And what were the most exciting plays in basketball, Mike? Mo Cheeks dishing to Bobby Jones, dishing to Julius Erving, these unbelievable dunks. Now, watch the NBA today. What happens when you get a fast break? You got guys peeling to the three-point line. Mm-hmm. It's a different game.
Yeah, or pulling up and just jacking a three.
Yeah, it's completely different game. So I think shooting is so important. And guys like that, Ben Simmons is a superstar, but he's not going to reach the level that you hoped unless the jump shot comes. So he could still be a very, very effective player, but he doesn't have that crazy, Ben's a 6'10" point guard. I mean, that's weird. That's crazy and freakish to have that kind of handle,
right,
that kind of length, and be able to handle the basketball. So he's a little bit different, but I only use him as an example because that's a guy who can't shoot and is still a big-time player. So he could do it, but it helps. If you want to really reach superstar status and you're a 6'5" wing guy, you better be able to shoot.
280, too. He's a big boy, so we'll see. John McMullen, Football at 4, every day, 4 p.m. We bring you all the latest on the NFL right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, pal.
Thanks, Mike.